readings are taken from Rays of the One Light, weekly commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. And this week is Dogmatism versus Common Sense. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it. Excuse me. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 7, Jesus warns, "Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Ye shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Wherefore by their fruits ye shall know them." Jesus here, as indeed many times during his teaching, counsels people to use their God-given common sense and not to rely on high-flown but undemonstrable claims. Common sense goes beyond abstract reason, for it is rooted in actual experience. Even common sense, however, is deficient when the judgment called for goes beyond sensory experience. Ultimately, what he emphasized always, therefore, was intuitive perception. Thus, he expected more of his disciples than crude common sense, and often scolded them for being too literal-minded, as he did elsewhere when they thought his statement, "I have meat to eat that you know not of," meant that he had steaks or sandwiches secreted about his person. His reference, of course, was to spiritual, not material substance. Words, even though appearing in the scriptures, are no substitute for direct perception of truth. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita says in the 2nd chapter, "The sage who knows God has as little need for the scriptures as one might have for a pond when the whole land is covered in flood." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Oh.
Isn't this amazing? It's so beautiful. I know the calendar, the astronomers, and all say spring starts on the 20th, but I think it started yesterday. Yesterday with the sunshine. And everybody who went to Home Depot thought it started yesterday, too. It has begun. It has begun. The flowers are so beautiful everywhere, they're popping up all over the place. And at Home Depot, we have just racks of them in all the different colors. And then the sun comes out and it's like, wow. It always reminds me of the scene, if you're familiar with the movie My Fair Lady. She's a flower seller in London. And so the movie opens with the streets of London's in the early dawn, and it's dingy and dusty and dark, and the dawn start coming up, but all the flowers are covered in these cloths, to keep them from freezing. And so there are these dark cloths, and then the music opens, and they just pull off all the tarps off the flowers, and you have this beautiful experience of all the flowers. Last week, in fact, I think it was whenever I was up here before, I talked about how much I liked wearing these robes as a light bearer. It reminded me of light. Today I wanted to wear pink and purple and orange and yellow. But I did not wear them because of dogmatism, okay? I did not wear them mainly because I knew there would be fallout if I did afterwards. And I woke up late, so I didn't have time to do that. But spring has sprung. So St. Teresa of Avila, I often quote her because I really love her writings and her practical and common sense way of approaching spirituality. She was responsible for putting together, I don't know, I think it was close to 20 or so what's the name if it's not men? Convents, thank you. Monasteries too, actually. She helped create monasteries too, but convents with with nuns who are going to be in perpetual cloister, which means you go in there, you close the door, and then you're there for the rest of your life together. And she had, she was very intelligent and incredibly intuitive, and she knew that common sense was very important when you lock people up together. And she said it was more important even than devotion, because devotion you can acquire with practice and with living an inner life. Your devotion grows. But she didn't really want to take any nuns without common sense, because that's kind of the bridge. In fact, one of somebody, I don't remember the name of the author, compiled a lot of her writings, excerpts from her writings, St. Teresa's writings, and called the book Ecstasy and Common Sense, because of the way she approached the spiritual path, which is very much like the way our line of gurus and Yogananda presented the spiritual path, which is why he said she's in tune with our teachings. Yogananda said intuition can be developed by exercising common sense. He also said difficulties can be overcome by determination, courage, common sense, and faith in God and yourself. In Swami's writing, Swami Kriyananda, the founder of Ananda, he wrote in a book that he called Supportive Leadership. He wrote about common sense, and he paired it with intuition again, and said that those two qualities have to work together harmoniously, because if you take each one of them by themselves, it doesn't work. In fact, he said common sense can be reduced to reduce all creative action to a state of rigor mortis, is what he said. And intuition alone, if allowed to go unchecked by common sense, can lead to disaster, is what he said. So the two of those really work together for success in leadership or in any endeavor. Because common sense is often sort of used as an anchor, as a weight to just hold everything down, to say, based on my experience, this won't work. Based on my experience, my experience is only this big, and what you're asking of me is bigger than that. And so common sense can be a way that people have of keeping that creative flow from actually happening. And experience alone doesn't lead to wisdom. We know enough people who do the same thing over and over and over again and don't learn. Teresa of Avila again said, "To reach something good, it is very useful to have gone astray and thus acquire experience." But the point is, what do you do with the experience? You have this experience now, and where are you going to go with it? What do you do with it? And so Swami again says, so there's a workable definition of common sense, which is the willingness to learn from experience. Because what we're supposed to be doing all the time, the whole point is we're supposed to be expanding, right? If we try to hold things small, try to contract, try to keep it to I, my, me, mine, then we're not moving, or we're moving in the wrong direction. And so what we want to do is continually expand our consciousness, continually expand and use our experience as a stepping stone to the next level of understanding. So with common sense and that willingness to learn, then we're open. Then we're ready to take in what God has to give us, and we're ready to move on. He says, I love this phrase, he says, common sense searches the known for guideposts to the unknown. So what we have is our experience. We have what we understand, where, however big we are, however much we can grasp and understand and know, and then we can use that and look for guideposts to say, so how do I use that to then move into this area that I may not know, I may not have any experience in? And that's how intuition goes. That's how we open the door to intuition. Intuition gives us the understanding without necessarily having all the experience. It comes to us from the superconscious. It comes to us where there is no dogmatism, and it comes to us and we have understanding, and we can follow that thread of intuition. So by being open and willing, then we're allowed to, what happens is intuition is allowed to grow. Dogmatism, of course, is the other end of the spectrum. Dogmatism keeps us bound. It's the opposite. It says, this is what's true, this is what's real, this is as big as I'm going to go, this is what you're supposed to do, this is what you should do, this is what fits into the expectation, and this is how you please man instead of pleasing God. In our reading it said, be not pleased when man is pleased. It's good if you're in a group of spiritually minded people like we are here, and people who have strong intuition, people who are trying to move in the right direction and are open and expansive to God's will. And if you decide to move forward, and there's a lot of those kind of people that say, I don't think so. It's good to pay attention to that. It's not necessarily, doesn't mean that you can't move forward, but it could be a warning. God and masters can work through those people and say, watch out. But to just make decisions based on making other people happy and keeping within that form, that's dogmatism. That says this is small. It makes me think of those ice cube trays. Ice cube trays, where you have these little blocks of ice, and they're all separate from one another, and they're hard, and you keep them separate. And so dogmatism says stay in that form. And of course, the other ingredient here that we need is humility, because we need to be able to recognize where we are and what we know. If we step beyond what we really have to stand on, then we get into real uncertain ground. If we try to pretend that we actually understand more, or that we're tuned in to something that nobody else can hear, or we just are fooling ourselves into saying that that we're in a different place from where we really are, then we get into trouble. So we need to be honest with ourselves and say, this is what I understand, this is my experience, and this is where I can stand firmly on solid ground, and I want to keep moving, but I have to start from the place where I am. And that requires humility, which is just self-honesty. Sometimes this just means looking at ourselves clearly and saying, this is where I am. That's why if we start, comparing ourselves and saying, well, she's over there, so I must be over there too. It doesn't work. It gets to be a real slippery slope. And everybody is different. Have you noticed that? Everybody is different. You look at the flowers out there as I was walking through Home Depot yesterday and looking at all these racks of flowers, just amazing variety. Not just color, but all the blossoms and the way they grow and the way they show themselves and the shapes and some of them are tall and skinny and some of them are little and some of them are like spiky and some of them are big and orange and some of them are green and yellow, and they're all so different. And if you look closely, even the ones that are of the same variety or same species, every single one of those are different, because God's power to manifest through this world and is infinite, all these different ways. And so it's true of us too, of course. Just it can all be very, very unique and individual and incredibly personal and very, what do I want to say, just very much inside ourselves, of taking those truths and trying to express them and trying to reach for more. But at the same time, there's always this and this, but at the same time, we still have to follow the rules, the universal law about how things work. We can't keep saying, but I'm special and I'm different, and so I'm going to do it this way, when the universe is saying, but that's not the way you're made, The way we're made is the energy comes up the spine, the energy goes here to the spiritual eye. Everybody has one. Everybody has one. Remember that Dr. Seuss book? There was a Dr. Seuss book when my kids were read about the stars. I forget. They had stars on their belly, and some of them have them, and some of them didn't. And the ones with the stars thought they were special because they had stars. Well, the good news is everybody's got one of these. Everybody has a spiritual eye because that's the way we're made. That's the way we've evolved through all of these different varieties, you know. What flower were you? You were probably wonderful flowers. We've got to go all through the flowers, all through evolution to the point where now this is the way we're made. We're made with this spine and this spiritual eye, and the energy is flowing up it, and we need to do whatever we can to move that energy that wants to just go out all the time. We need to move it in, up the spine and up here. And that's what the techniques are for. That's what the masters come for. They say, okay, now you're ready. Now you're ready to learn. Here we go. We're going to move the energy in. We're going to move the energy up. And you can do these techniques, and you can do Kriya, you can do all these things to help that energy move that way. So we can't go outside of that and say, oh, it works differently for me. All my energy goes to my big toe, and I need to do it that way. It doesn't work that way. But within that reality of, you know, having our chakras and opening and releasing and moving all that energy to the spiritual eye, we also have all our own unique karma and all our own way of interacting with the world and with each other and with the gurus, so that it's unique to each one of us. And that's what makes it so fun and interesting. Like the flower, if there was only one kind of flower, it would get boring after a while. Love all the variety. The saints also, what's fun and fascinating about reading and studying about the saints and the avatars is every one of them is different. They've all done the same thing. All 5 of these have all done the same thing and reached the same point of realization. But they all look different. They all do it differently. They all have a different expression of that. In fact, Master said, somebody asked him once whether he brought a new religion when he came to the West. Did you bring a new religion? He said, no, I didn't bring a new religion. I brought a new expression. Because it's the same truths, the same reality that all of them connect to and that all of them teach. Across the world, across the eons, across time, on other planets, everywhere. It's the same thing. But they work with each one of us to find that unique expression. I think that's why sometimes people tend to go towards dogmatism and trying to hold on to it, because it's so big and it's so universal and it's so beyond our normal understanding that it's overwhelming. It gets so big. And so to dogmatize something means to make it small and manageable, to bring it into a place where I can hold this and see it and understand it and look at it and see all sides of it. And I feel much more comfortable that way. And it also, the disciples of different masters have a tendency over time to do that, even with the teachings from their guru, is to bring it down, hold it, get it into a box, get it into a frozen little place in the ice cube tray, and say, this is what it is. Because then we feel like, okay, I've got this. I can handle this. But in reality, it's this huge thing. And it's underlying everything. And it goes on forever. And it always was. And it always will be. And it applies to everyone, every creature, every soul, everywhere. And it's like, wow, And this chant we did this morning, I asked Michael to do it, that from joy I came, from joy I live, and sacred joy I melt again. There's a There's a recording of Yogananda, one of his talks on one of the CDs you can listen to, where he says this chant with his booming voice. He says, "From joy I came, from joy I live, in sacred joy I melt again." And then there's this pause and he says, "But it's not easy melting." He says, and I love that. When I hear that chant, I think, it's not easy melting, Master. It's not easy, because you have to take those little frozen ice cubes in that tray that are all separate and manageable and we can hold on to. And when they melt, it's like, where do they go? How do you hold on to that? What do you do with that? And we need to melt. Ramakrishna's way of saying it was like peeling an onion. You take an onion and you keep peeling back the layers, and you peel more layers, and there's another layer, and you peel a layer, and what do you wind up with? Nothing. Because those layers are what keeping us separate. Those layers are what are keeping us in that place of thinking that it's only this big. And once you start pulling back those layers, there's nothing left. It's like melting. In sacred joy, I melt. It sounds so wonderful, doesn't it? Just to melt away and just let everything go. But it's hard. But it's hard to do, because then we have to let go of all those things that we're so comfortable with and that we feel like make us, make me. We have to let it go and melt into that sacred joy. So why is forgiveness part of this topic this morning too? Well, when I thought about it, it's the same thing, isn't it? Forgiveness means we're holding on to something and keeping it very small, and keeping it to ourselves and saying, this is mine. It really hurt, and this is mine, and I want to hold it, and it's part of me now, and I'm going to carry it with me, and it's going to be part of my little frozen ice cube that I'm in here. Not to make light of it. People do awful things. People do really awful things. What is it that Yukteswar said? He said, you know it, Matthew, the nature of man is very unreliable, unpredictable, until we are anchored in God. That's when he said the past lives of all men are dark with many shames. And then he says I think it's the nature of man is predictably unreliable. Pardon? Until anchored in God. So we all get off course. We all are unreliable in that sense. We're not perfect yet. We're not operating on that level of perfection. We do awful things to each other. People do horrible things. And so we get hurt and we hold on to that. But the fact is, again, without forgiveness, we just stay in our little frozen ice cube. We can't melt. You can't melt until you let go of that and you forgive and you say, gee, they really messed up. They're trying to get there too. For some reason they thought that was going to take them closer to happiness. Whatever it was. And as we get bigger, again, as we expand, it's really interesting because it all comes back to the same thing. Every teaching we have, every practice that we have, every time we get up here and talk, every lesson that I look at, every time I do that, I look through all the readings and I look through what Master says, it always comes back to the same thing. We have to expand. We can't stay small. And there's part of us that just wants to stay small because it's just so much safer. But if we stay small, then like I said, we're just in our own little ice cube. We're in our own little world. And it hurts. It's actually painful to stay small and rigid and try to hold that because the entire universe is expanding. Even the scientists now are saying it's all getting bigger. It's all expanding. Everything about the nature of creation is telling us to move and to open and to get bigger. And And so when we forgive, when we actually look at those hurts that we have and those things that just are in our heart that are blocking that wonderful, beautiful flow of joy, we've got to let them go. And the only way to let them go is to forgive. It doesn't work any other way. We can't let them go, and we can't say, oh, I'm not bothered by it anymore. It's gone. It's wonderful. Everything's okay. But I still think he's a creep, you know? We can't, it doesn't work. You gotta not only let it go and try to get over that hurt, but you actually have to forgive and say, they're a child of God too. They're doing the same thing I'm doing, trying to get to that light. And they have a spiritual eye, just like me. They're trying to get there, just like me. That forgiveness is so critical, and it is so hard. It's the hardest part about melting, I think, because we just, those hurts are, those hurts are so personal. That's, I think, what it is that it's not big and cosmic, it's not, it's very, very personal. It's very, very much about me and my places of misunderstanding, and my little places where I get stuck, and my little habits, and my little way of looking at the world, and it's just very, very personal. And sometimes we really want somebody to understand. I just want you to understand how much this really, really hurts, and it hurts right here. But they can't, not on the level, because it's very personal for us, which means, you know what that means? Which means God gave it to us. Just to us. Because we all have this unique path to walk. We all have a way to get to that light, and the gurus know exactly what it is that's blocking our path. One of us could just walk up the aisle here and go right that way, but Master knows that I have this thing that's right in my way, and this thing needs to move, this thing needs to melt, and so the Masters give it to us. And we say, ow, 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 it really, really hurts. And they say, yeah, it does. So let go of it. Let go of it and get bigger. Get bigger so that you can just melt into that, and that's not an obstacle anymore. It's really hard. But their job is to help us do it. And they won't give up on us, and they won't walk away and say, you're on your own, kid. They will be there with us, helping us with it, helping us to get there. Every step of the way until we're there, until all the way there. I am going to read to you from Whispers. You're probably surprised by that. So, this one is number 128, I beheld thee hiding behind the flowers. It's for today. I looked at a flower and prayed. Suddenly, oh, Father, I beheld thee hiding there. It exuded to me the perfume of thy presence. I saw the blush of thy purity coloring its petals. It was the gold of thy wisdom that shone in its heart. Thine all-embracing, upholding power filled its delicate calyx. The mystery of life and immortality lay in the pollen, lifted by the bee when it tasted thy sweetness. Oh, teach me thy wonders of creation, which are hinted at even in the tiniest roadside weed. Om, peace, amen. We have some more beautiful music to share.